The rain had begun as a whisper, barely brushing the edges of the windows, but soon it became a soft drum, tapping a steady rhythm on the roof. I sat at the small kitchen table, a steaming mug of tea warming my hands, staring at the shadows the dim light cast across the walls. Outside, the world was muted, grey and endless, like a painting left unfinished. I loved these quiet moments when everything slowed down, and it felt like I could almost catch my own thoughts before they scattered. My life was too simple. Some might say. I lived in a modest apartment on the edge of town, the kind of place people passed by without a second glance. My neighbors nodded politely, smiled briefly, and kept their distance. I didn't mind. Solitude suited me. It was safer that way. Safer than the whispers behind my back, the secret smiles when someone noticed I didn't belong anywhere. I had always been different. Not in an obvious way, but in a subtle, undeniable way that made people uncomfortable. In the pack, I was what they called wolfless. The word alone carried weight. A quiet judgment that followed me like a shadow I couldn't escape. I had never asked to be different, yet here I was, always on the edge, never fully part of anything. And maybe I had accepted it too easily, believing I was destined to drift along unnoticed and unremarkable. Even now, as the steam curled up from my mug, I felt the sting of those words, whispered just last week in the hallway of the academy. She'd never be one of us. Wolfless, always wolfless. I remembered the cold smirk on the boy's face, the way the girls tittered behind their hands. I clenched the mug tighter, as if I could hold on to my dignity just by gripping it. But as I gazed out the window at the rain, I felt a strange stir beneath my ribs, a sensation that had nothing to do with the storm and everything to do with me. It was fleeting, almost like the brush of a wing against my skin, soft and urgent. I frowned, looking around the room as if someone had entered, but the apartment was empty. Only the shadows moved, dancing with the flickering of the candle on the counter. I sipped my tea, trying to push the feeling aside. My life was ordinary, and I liked it that way. Routine was my safety net. Wake, work, come home, tea, sleep. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't thrilling, but it was mine. And yet, sometimes I wondered if that was enough. Sometimes I wondered what it would feel like to be noticed. Truly noticed by someone who understood the quiet pieces of me that everyone else ignored. That night, the air smelled different, heavy with wet earth and something else I couldn't name. The kind of scent that made the hair on your arms stand on end, like a warning and an invitation rolled into one. I didn't know it then, but it was the first sign that my life was about to change. That the world I had grown used to safe, predictable, dull was about to stretch and twist into something I could never have imagined. I set my mug down and moved to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. The rain blurred the lights of the street below, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure in the shadows. It was tall, impossible to see clearly, but there was a presence to it that made my chest tighten. I blinked, and it was gone, leaving only the rain and the reflection of my own face staring back at me. I shook my head, telling myself it was just my imagination, perhaps exhaustion, or the loneliness that wrapped around me like a heavy cloak. And yet, even as I tried to dismiss it, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was waiting for me, not with malice, not with harm, but with a purpose I couldn't yet understand. I turned away from the window and sank back into my chair. My mug was cold now, the tea gone bitter, but I didn't mind. My thoughts were elsewhere, swirling around that fleeting shadow, the brush of the invisible wing. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of anticipation in my chest, a sensation I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. A question hovered in my mind, impossible to answer. What if my life wasn't meant to be ordinary? The clock ticked on, loud in the quiet room. Outside, the storm had grown stronger, wind shaking the windows, and yet inside, I felt a strange warmth spreading through me. Not comfort, not relief, but something like possibility. Something that whispered I wasn't done, that there was more waiting just beyond the edge of my world. Then, as I stared into the darkening street one last time, a flash of silver light caught my eye. Quick, impossible, and fleeting, it moved with a grace no human could manage. And yet I knew, in the core of my being, that it was real. My heart jumped and I felt the air thrum around me, alive with a strange energy. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything began. The moment I stopped being invisible. The moment I stepped, unknowingly, into a story larger than myself. A story that would challenge every belief I had. Every fear I had learned to live with. And then, as if sensing my awareness, the air shifted. A voice soft, low, and impossibly close brushed against my mind. Not words exactly, but a thought, a feeling, something intimate and impossible to ignore. You've been waiting. I've been waiting. I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. The storm outside raged, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside me. And just like that, I realized the world I knew, the life I had thought was all I could ever have, was about to vanish forever. The morning after the storm, the world seemed quieter, softer, as if it had been washed clean and made new. I opened my apartment window and inhaled the scent of wet earth and fresh leaves, letting it fill my lungs. The street below was empty, glistening with puddles that reflected the pale sunlight like scattered mirrors. Something about it made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain, a longing for more than routine, for something I didn't yet have the words for. It started subtly. A tingling in my fingertips as I washed dishes, a faint warmth that seemed to radiate from nowhere. At first, I thought it was a trick of the mind, a leftover echo from the storm. But the sensation returned again and again, like a heartbeat hidden beneath my own, soft but insistent. I found myself glancing toward the shadows of my apartment, half expecting to see someone standing there. Of course, there was no one, only the quiet hum of my home. The sensation followed me as I walked to work, weaving through the streets of the city like a secret companion. I noticed details I hadn't before. The subtle sway of a tree branch, the way a single raindrop clung to a leaf before falling, the way the wind carried voices of the world in its invisible threads. It was as if the ordinary had been peeled back, revealing a hidden layer of life I had never seen. And I realized, with a shiver of something I couldn't yet name, that I was beginning to feel it, not just see it, but feel it. At the small cafe where I worked, everything felt sharper, more vivid. The scent of freshly baked bread seemed richer. The warmth of the coffee in my hands, comforting in a new, profound way. Customers' faces were clearer, their emotions easier to read. I caught the faintest flicker of annoyance behind a young woman's smile, a hint of longing in an older man's eyes. Normally, these details escaped me, lost in the blur of everyday life. But now, they were impossible to ignore. Wasn't just perception. My body felt different, too, lighter, quicker, more aware of itself. When I reached for a cup, my hand moved with a precision I had never known. My steps on the cafe floor were quieter, smoother, almost as if I were gliding rather than walking. It was exhilarating and terrifying. A small part of me wanted to dismiss it as coincidence or imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something inside me was awakening. That evening, after my shift, I decided to walk home through the park. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp grass and pine. Shadows stretched long under the lamplights, and I felt the pull again, that unexplainable tug in my chest, like an invisible thread guiding me somewhere. I followed it instinctively, letting it lead me off the main path and toward a small clearing I had never noticed before. The clearing was quiet, almost sacred, as if it had been waiting for me. Moonlight spilled over the grass in silver waves, and the air hummed with a gentle vibration that made the hairs on my arms rise. I stood there, heart hammering, trying to understand what I was feeling. It was more than anticipation. It was longing, recognition, a strange mixture of fear and hope. And then, for the first time, I saw a movement at the edge of the clearing, barely perceptible, like a shadow shifting in the corner of my eye. I froze, breath caught in my throat. The shadow didn't run or hide. It stayed just beyond my vision, observing, waiting. I felt a thrill of connection, as though it knew me, as though it had been expecting me. I wanted to step closer, to see clearly, but my legs refused to move. Instead, I raised my hand slowly, almost trembling, and waved. Nothing happened at first, and then a soft sound like a whisper in the wind, gentle but insistent, brushed against my ears. "You are not alone." The words weren't spoken aloud, yet I understood them perfectly. My chest tightened, and a rush of warmth spread through me. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like the girl everyone had dismissed, the wolfless one who never belonged. I felt seen. I turned toward home slowly, my mind racing, my heart still pounding with the echo of that whisper. Every step felt heavier, yet lighter, as if my body was learning to carry a new weight, a new presence that wasn't entirely mine, yet was undeniably part of me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the shadow following me. But there was nothing, only the park, now quiet and ordinary again. Back in my apartment, I sat at the window, staring at the reflection of my own face in the glass. My eyes seemed sharper, brighter, and I caught a flicker of something I didn't recognize. Was it courage? Was it power? Or simply the awareness that my life was shifting, changing in ways I couldn't yet control? The possibilities thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. Later that night, as I drifted into restless sleep, I dreamed of a figure I had never met but somehow knew. Tall, strong, and impossible to ignore, with eyes like silver fire and a presence that made the air itself seem alive. In the dream, he reached out, and when our hands brushed, I felt a shock not painful, but awakening, like the spark of life itself. I woke with a gasp, my room dark and still, yet my skin still tingling with the echo of that impossible touch. The following morning, the world seemed different again. Every sound, every movement carried significance. Even the smallest things, the flutter of a bird's wings, the ripple of water in the fountain outside my window, felt charged with meaning. I realized, with a mix of awe and fear, that nothing would ever feel ordinary again. And then it happened. While walking through a quiet alley on my way to the cafe, I saw it a silver glimmer, quick and deliberate, darting across the shadows. My heart caught. For a brief, impossible moment, I thought I glimpsed the figure from my dream, standing just beyond the reach of the lamplight. My feet moved toward it instinctively, curiosity and fear warring in my chest. But when I reached the spot, nothing. Only shadows, cold and still, and the lingering scent of something wild and alive. I swallowed hard and kept walking. But the feeling stayed with me, wrapped around my thoughts like a whisper I couldn't shake. Something was coming. Something beyond my understanding, beyond the ordinary life I had clung to for so long. And deep inside, I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain, that my world, the life I had always accepted, was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. Shiver ran down my spine, and I smiled, trembling. Change was near. And though I didn't know it yet, I was ready, or at least, I was ready enough to begin. That night, the air was unusually still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was waiting for me, just beyond the edges of what I could see. The moon hung low and heavy over the rooftops, spilling silver light across the streets and alleyways, turning shadows into soft, liquid shapes that seemed to ripple as I passed. I had wandered farther than usual, following a pull I couldn't name, toward a part of the city that felt ancient and alive. Even the sounds were different here. The gentle rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind against stone walls, the distant call of a bird that didn't belong in the night. Every sense felt heightened, and a strange tension coiled in my chest, equal parts anticipation and fear. Then I saw him. He was standing in the middle of a deserted courtyard, and the moment I laid eyes on him, the world seemed to tilt slightly, as if reality had shifted to make room for his presence. It wasn't his height or his posture that drew me. It was something far less tangible, something magnetic, a pull that made my heart stutter and my breath catch, as though my body recognized him before my mind could even begin to understand. I wanted to turn away, to retreat into the safety of shadows, but my feet moved forward without my consent. Every step toward him felt both terrifying and inevitable, like walking into a dream I had long forgotten I'd had. The air around him seemed to shimmer faintly, charged for the quiet energy I couldn't place, yet instinctively trusted. It was not threatening. It was expectant. He tilted his head slightly, as if aware of my gaze even before I reached the edge of the courtyard. And in that small gesture, I felt a strange familiarity, as though I had known him long before this night. Across some distance I could not name. A shiver ran down my spine. I had always been cautious of strangers, but something about him made caution impossible. Our first words were unnecessary. Silence stretched between us, but it was not uncomfortable. It was alive, filled with the weight of understanding, of shared awareness. I felt seen in a way I never had before, not for my outward appearance, not for who others said I was or wasn't, but for the quiet, unremarkable parts of me that no one else noticed. He finally spoke. His voice low, soft, almost a vibration in the air rather than a sound. "You've been searching." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. "For what?" I asked, though my voice felt small, uncertain. "For yourself," he replied, and the words seemed to hang in the space between us, heavy and luminous. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. How could someone I had just met understand so much about the loneliness I carried, the invisible weight I had lived with all my life? We didn't move closer or further apart. The distance between us felt perfect, charged with unspoken questions and answers. I felt drawn, magnetically, toward him, yet part of me wanted to run, to retreat into the safety of the familiar world I had always known. But that part of me was shrinking, fading beneath a rising awareness that my ordinary life, quiet, predictable, safe, was about to dissolve into something larger, something I could not resist. He shifted slightly, and I noticed the faintest glimmer of silver in the air around him, subtle but undeniable. I blinked, uncertain if my eyes were playing tricks on me, and when I looked again, it was gone. Yet the feeling it left remained, a pulse, a rhythm in the night that seemed to beat in sync with my own heart. "You feel it too, don't you?" His voice was closer now, though his position hadn't changed. It was intimate without words, electric without touch. My throat went dry. I nodded, unsure if he could see it, unsure if I wanted him to. I had never felt so aware of my own sensations, so acutely alive and fragile at the same time. He smiled, though faintly, and it was like a sunrise cutting through mist. Warmth spread through me, a quiet reassurance that I had never known I needed. "Good," he said. "You're ready to see what has always been waiting for you." I wanted to ask him what he meant, to demand clarity, but the words stuck in my throat. My mind was spinning, a storm of curiosity, disbelief, and something I could only describe as longing. I didn't know what I was being led into, and yet every fibre of my being wanted to follow, to surrender to the unknown and trust the presence before me. The courtyard was silent, except for the sound of my own breathing. But in that silence, I felt a rhythm, subtle and insistent, as though the night itself had taken notice of our meeting. The wind swirled around us in gentle eddies, and I caught the faint scent of something wild and earthy like the forest after a storm, pure and alive. It made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. Then he stepped closer, just a small movement, enough to blur the shadows between us. My pulse quickened. I felt the space around me change, as though invisible threads had woven themselves into a web that connected us. I didn't understand how it worked, or why it was happening, but I felt it an undeniable, magnetic pull. "I've been waiting," he said again, softer this time, almost a whisper meant only for me. And in the way he said it, I understood something fundamental, something I hadn't allowed myself to believe. I was not alone. Not now, not ever. The world outside the courtyard felt distant, irrelevant. The hum of the city, the flickering streetlights, the empty streets, all of it faded into the background. There was only the moment charged and infinite between us. And though I didn't know his name, though I didn't know the boundaries of this encounter, I felt the stirrings of a connection that defied reason. One that felt both terrifying and impossibly right. Time seemed to stretch. The moonlight painted silver across his face, across the space between us, and in that light, I caught a glimmer of something extraordinary. Not in him, exactly, but in the air we shared. The tension, the rhythm, the unspoken promise. My heart ached with a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. I had always lived in a world of ordinary days, invisible walls, and quiet isolation. And now, in the span of a single heartbeat, that world was gone. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he stepped back, the faint shimmer in the air fading like mist under the sun. I wanted to speak, to ask him who he was, why he was here, what this meant, but the words fled me. I only knew one thing. My life had changed. Something extraordinary had touched it, and I could never go back to the way things were. I stayed in the courtyard long after he was gone, staring at the empty space where he had stood. The silver moonlight lingered on the stone beneath my feet, and I traced the echoes of his presence in the shadows. My chest still throbbed with the memory of his voice, of the pull I could not resist. And a single thought settled deep in my mind. I had to see him again. I had to know what or who he truly was. Even as I walked home, the night seemed alive around me, charged with a quiet, unnameable energy. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind felt like a message, a clue, a call to follow. My ordinary world, the one I had clung to for safety, was gone. And I realized, with a thrill and a tremor I could not control, that I was standing at the edge of something larger than myself, something that might change everything I had ever known about the world. And about me. The days after the courtyard encounter blurred into one another, yet each carried a strange, unmistakable weight. My routine remained the same on the surface: wake, shower, walk to the cafe, serve customers, return home, but beneath it, everything had begun to tremble. The ordinary world I had clung to felt fragile, as if a slight breeze could tear it apart and reveal the hidden currents of a larger, unseen life. It began subtly, with small coincidences that could have been dismissed, yet felt charged with meaning. I would reach for something at work, a glass, a book, a spoon, and find it waiting for me before my fingers even brushed it. Shadows seemed to linger longer than they should, brushing against the edges of my vision like a soft warning. And in quiet moments, when no one was around, I thought I could hear a faint hum in the air, low and insistent, like the echo of a heartbeat not my own. Dreams came next, vivid and impossible. Each night, I drifted into slumber and found myself in places I had never been. Yet they felt familiar, as though my soul had walked there long before my body. A silver forest stretched endlessly beneath a moon I didn't recognize, and in the midst of it stood a figure, silent, watching. I never saw his face clearly, yet every part of me knew him. Every fiber of my being thrummed in recognition, a song I couldn't name, but that resonated deep in my chest. I woke each morning with the echo of his presence lingering in my mind, soft but unrelenting. Even the people around me seemed different, though they had not changed at all. A young woman at the cafe paused mid-step, as though sensing something invisible nearby. An old man at the market lingered in my path, offering a knowing smile that made my stomach tighten for no reason I could explain. It was as though the world itself was aware of the shift inside me, bending subtly to acknowledge it. And then there were the surges of emotion unbidden, intense and inexplicable. A rush of fear when I stepped into an alley I had walked 100 times before. A surge of warmth when I touched a simple object, like a doorknob or the rim of a mug. A sudden prickling awareness of another presence in the room, even when I was alone. I began to wonder if my senses had expanded, or if the ordinary world had simply become a doorway to something extraordinary. I tried to explain it to myself logically. Perhaps I was tired or lonely, or imagining things. Perhaps it was stress, or the remnants of the storm, or some trick of my imagination. And yet, every time I tried to rationalize it, the feeling of anticipation returned irresistible, undeniable, like the pull of a tide I could not resist. I felt as if the world had quietly rearranged itself, and I was only just beginning to notice the subtle shifts. One afternoon, walking home through the park, I felt it most clearly. The sunlight fell in uneven patterns through the branches, and the wind carried a scent that made my chest ache. Earth, rain, and something wild beneath it, something old and alive. I stopped mid-step, closing my eyes and letting the sensation wash over me. It was more than curiosity. It was recognition, a silent invitation to step further into a world I had never allowed myself to imagine. And then I heard the faintest sound, soft, deliberate, almost like a sigh carried on the breeze. My eyes snapped open. A shadow flitted across the clearing, just beyond the reach of the light, and my heart caught in my chest. I knew instinctively that it was him, though I had no reason to, no proof. Only the certainty that he existed, and that he was near, as if he had been following the same invisible path that now guided me. That night, sleep came reluctantly. My dreams were more vivid than ever, pulling me into the silver forest again, where the figure waited. This time, he stepped closer, not threatening, not demanding, but patient, almost reverent. I reached out in my dream, hand trembling, and felt a pulse of warmth that ran through my palm, through my wrist, through my very bones. I awoke gasping, fingers curling around the edge of my blanket, feeling the lingering spark of something more, something impossible at work the next day. I noticed a subtle shift in the way I moved. Tasks that had once felt heavy and mundane now flowed effortlessly. My hands worked with precision I hadn't known I possessed. My mind caught details I had always overlooked, the way a customer's smile faltered for a second, the tone of a colleague's voice, the faint rustle of leaves outside the window. I felt connected in a way I could not explain, as though the ordinary fabric of the world had become a living network, threading through me and around me, and the feeling became almost overwhelming. Every heartbeat was accompanied by an echo of something larger. Every breath carried a tinge of awareness that wasn't mine alone. And I began to notice the glimmers, tiny, fleeting, unexplainable of movement at the edge of my vision. A flash of silver along the rooftops. A ripple in the shadows. A faint brush of air against my skin. Each one made my pulse quicken. Each one carried the same unspoken message. He was near. And he had not left. It was during one of these quiet moments, standing by the window as the sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson, that the realization struck me, sudden and undeniable. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't mistaken. Something had changed inside me, something fundamental and irreversible. The world I had believed to be ordinary was no longer ordinary. And whatever had found me, whatever had stirred the wind, the shadows, the air itself was pulling me toward a destiny I could no longer ignore. My chest tightened. Not with fear, but with a strange, thrilling awareness. For the first time, I felt like a part of something bigger than myself. Something invisible but undeniably real. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. And in that instant, I understood that the world I had accepted as safe, as predictable, as unchanging, had already slipped from my grasp. I was standing at the edge of a doorway I couldn't see, and beyond it lay something extraordinary. A shiver ran down my spine, carrying both anticipation and recognition. I turned toward the mirror and looked at myself. Really looked, and for the first time in years, I saw not just the girl who had lived in shadows, the wolfless one, the quiet observer of life, but someone on the cusp of transformation. Someone capable of stepping into a world that had always existed just out of reach. And somewhere, deep beneath the awareness, I felt him again, the pulse of his presence threading through the night, a whisper in the air that promised more. It was a small realization, subtle yet profound, like the first brush of sunlight over a horizon I had never noticed before. Everything I had known, my fears, my isolation, my sense of invisibility, was about to be rewritten. The ordinary world was no longer safe, but it had become infinitely more alive. And for the first time, I felt not fear, but anticipation, tinged with the faintest thrill of wonder. The ordinary was gone, and I could feel it somewhere, just beyond sight, just beyond the edge of understanding, that something extraordinary was waiting for me. The night air carried a quiet hum, the kind that made the world feel alive in places we couldn't see. I walked along the edge of the park, the same path I had wandered countless times, yet tonight it felt different, charged with a tension that made my pulse quicken. Something or someone was waiting for me. I could feel it. And when I stepped into the clearing, there he was, standing silently beneath the moonlight, as if he had been carved from the shadows themselves. Our eyes met, and for a moment words felt unnecessary. His presence filled the space around me, warm yet intense, and I realized with a start that I was holding my breath. I took a cautious step forward, and he mirrored me, the distance between us shrinking without a single word. There was a rhythm to it, unspoken and magnetic, and I felt my chest tighten with a mixture of anticipation and something I couldn't name. "You came," he said softly, his voice blending with the night, low and gentle but carrying an edge of certainty that made my stomach twist. I didn't know if I should," I admitted, my fingers curling nervously at my sides. "I've never done anything like this before." He smiled, faint but unmistakable, and it reached his eyes, softening the intensity that had made my heart skip. "Neither had I," he said. "But sometimes we don't get to choose. We follow the pull, or it follows us." I wanted to ask him what he meant, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I nodded, feeling a strange warmth spread through me. Something about the way he spoke, The quiet steadiness of his gaze made me want to trust him, to believe that whatever this was, it was safe, or at least as safe as the unknown could be. We walked together, silently, through the clearing. The moonlight painted silver lines across the grass, turning ordinary shapes into something magical. I found myself noticing every subtle detail, how his footsteps were careful, deliberate, almost as if he was attuned to the world in ways I couldn't yet understand. I wanted to ask questions, to understand, but a part of me simply wanted to observe, to be near him without expectation. "You're different," he said suddenly, as though reading my thoughts. "Not like the others." I blinked, startled by the observation. "Different how?" I asked softly, unsure if I wanted the answer. He tilted his head slightly, eyes fixed on me. "You notice things. You feel things. Most people live in the world without ever really touching it. You do, and that's why you were drawn here." I swallowed hard, feeling my cheeks warm. "I don't understand." He took a small step closer, just enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, without breaking the invisible boundary between us. "You will," he said. "In time. For now, trust that the pull you feel isn't random." Trust. The word hovered in my mind, weighty and significant. I wanted to trust him, wanted to believe, but caution was a reflex I had lived with my whole life. And yet, something inside me, a spark I hadn't known existed, urged me forward. Urged me to step beyond fear and embrace this strange, magnetic connection. We sat on the edge of a fallen log, moonlight spilling across the clearing in pools of silver. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, charged with unspoken questions and answers. I felt my thoughts drifting, uncertain, yet strangely calm. His presence was grounding, even as it stirred 1,000 unfamiliar emotions. "You're not like anyone I've met," I finally admitted, voice barely more than a whisper. "And you're not like anyone I've known," he replied. His tone wasn't boastful or distant, it was an acknowledgement, a recognition of something rare and fragile between us. I felt my chest tighten. "Why me?" I asked, though the question felt inadequate. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out, just enough for his fingers to brush against mine, and the contact sent a ripple through me, subtle but undeniable. It was electric, though not in the way of danger, more in the way of a quiet awakening, a confirmation that I mattered in ways I hadn't imagined. "You were ready," he said finally, voice low, almost reverent. "You've always been ready. You just didn't know it yet." I stared at him, trying to process the words, trying to reconcile the ordinary life I had known with the extraordinary presence before me. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside, a mixture of hope, fear, and a pull I could neither resist nor ignore. We talked then, slowly, haltingly at first, each word building a fragile bridge between us. He asked questions about my life, my fears, my dreams, and I found myself answering honestly, something I rarely did. With each confession, with each shared silence, the invisible threads between us grew stronger, weaving a bond that felt delicate, yet unbreakable. I learned that he had been watching, in a way that was protective, not invasive. That he had felt my presence, my loneliness, and had waited not out of obligation, but out of understanding. I felt a warmth spread through me, the kind that comes from recognition and acceptance, the kind that says, without words, "You are seen. You are not alone." At one point, I laughed softly at a joke he made, and it startled me how natural it felt, how unforced. There was a comfort here, in his presence, a feeling that despite the strangeness of everything, I belonged. And yet, intertwined with that comfort, was an edge of confusion, a subtle tension I couldn't ignore. Why me? Why now? And what did this mean for the world I had always known, safe and predictable as it was? The night deepened and shadows stretched long across the clearing, yet I didn't feel fear. Only fascination, only a quiet, steady pull toward him that I could not explain. The air between us seemed to hum, alive with possibilities I was only beginning to sense. I realized, with a start, that I wanted to know more, not just about him, but about the connection we shared, the invisible thread that bound us together in ways I couldn't yet understand. Then, without warning, he leaned slightly closer, though still careful to respect the space between us. His voice dropped, soft, almost a whisper meant only for me. There are things you will have to learn about yourself, about the world, things that will challenge everything you think you know. My pulse quickened. And, are you? My words faltered, uncertain how to phrase the question. I'll be here, he said simply. You won't face it alone. His promise settled over me, a quiet, steady reassurance that made my chest ache with emotion. I wanted to believe it, to cling to it, and yet a small, insistent part of me wondered what he truly meant. What challenges awaited? And how far would this bomb stretch? The night air carried a hint of frost, brushing against my skin, and I realized how late it had become. I stood, feeling the pull of ordinary responsibilities tugging at me, yet reluctant to leave the clearing, reluctant to step away from the presence that had become so essential in such a short span of time. He rose with me, silent and graceful, the moonlight painting the edges of his form in silver. Tomorrow, he said, we continue. There's more to show you, more for you to understand. I nodded, words failing me, and as I walked away, I felt a subtle tension lingering, a promise and a question intertwined. My life, ordinary just days ago, had shifted irreversibly. And in that shift, in that quiet, electric bond we were building, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel. Hope that I was no longer invisible. Hope that someone truly understood me. And hope that, somehow, this connection, strange, unexplainable, and utterly magnetic, was only the beginning of a journey neither of us could yet fully comprehend. The morning sun spilled across my apartment, painting the walls in shades of gold that felt almost too bright, too alive. I woke with a lingering sense of anticipation, as if the night had whispered a secret to me while I slept. My dreams had been restless, echoing the silver forest, the figure in the moonlight, and that pull I couldn't name. Something was waiting, something that had been waiting far longer than I had imagined. Cale appeared as if summoned by the very air around me. He didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. One moment the room was quiet. The next, he stood in the doorway, calm, certain, and impossibly present. I wanted to speak, to ask 100 questions, but my voice caught, and he simply smiled, the warmth in his eyes making me feel like I had been seen in ways no one ever had. There's something you need to know, he said softly, and the weight in his tone made my stomach tighten. Something I should have told you from the start. I nodded, unsure if I was ready, but unwilling to turn away. What is it? I whispered, heart hammering. He stepped closer, his presence filling the room, and I felt the invisible pull between us tighten, like threads being drawn taut. You're not ordinary, he began. Not in the way anyone has ever told you. You were never meant to be unnoticed, never meant to live in shadows. There's a legacy in your blood, a connection that has been waiting to awaken. I blinked, the words echoing in my mind. Legacy? Connection? What are you talking about? Cale reached out, lightly brushing a strand of hair from my face, a gesture so tender it made my chest ache. You carry a bond, one that links you to the wolf clans and the ancient guardians who protect this world. That's why you felt the pull, why the air hums around you, why the forest calls you in your dreams. You were chosen, or perhaps more accurately, you were destined. The word destined hung in the room like a chord struck too sharply. My mind whirled. Me? Chosen? A quiet girl, unnoticed by everyone. Now part of a history I had never known existed. The thought was dizzying, almost impossible to grasp. Yet the certainty in Cale's voice made disbelief fade into something else, something like awe. Why didn't you tell me before? I asked, voice trembling. Why now? He hesitated, a flicker of conflict crossing his features. Because it wasn't time. You had to find your own strength first. The world isn't safe for someone like you until you know what you carry inside. His eyes held mine, intense and unflinching. And until you were ready to trust me. The revelation hit me in waves. I could still remember the whispered judgments, the teasing, the sense of being invisible my whole life. And now, the truth stretched behind those years like a shadow and a light intertwined. I had been underestimated, not because I was ordinary, but because no one had ever known the power lying dormant within me. The thought made tears sting my eyes, and I swallowed hard to steady myself. You mean, all this time, I wasn't weak? My voice barely rose above a whisper. You were never weak, he said, softly but firmly. You were learning, waiting, becoming. And now, he stepped even closer, the intensity of his presence undeniable. Now the world is beginning to notice. A chill ran through me. The pull I had felt in the forest, in the park, even in my apartment, was not just an illusion. It was a signal. And the signal meant that I had a place in a world I had never known existed. A world of guardians, of wolves, of power and protection that had been hidden from sight. Cale gestured for me to follow him. There's someone you need to meet, he said, voice calm but edged with urgency. I hesitated, still unsure of what awaited me, yet some invisible thread pulled me toward him. Step by step, I walked beside him, leaving the apartment and stepping into the city streets, which now seemed smaller, quieter, and almost fragile under the weight of the secret. I carried Dot. We arrived at an old library tucked into a corner I had never noticed. Its stone walls draped with ivy, and its windows glowing with warm light. It smelled of parchment, candle wax, and something earthy that reminded me of the forest from my dreams. Cale led me inside, and my eyes widened at the shelves stretching impossibly high, filled with tomes that seemed centuries old. You're going to understand everything here, he said. But you must listen carefully. The truth isn't just history. It's alive. It will guide you, but it will also challenge you. We stopped in front of a large, leather-bound book. Its pages shimmered faintly in the candlelight, as if aware of our presence. Cale opened it slowly, reverently, and as he did, images appeared in the air above it, visions of forests, wolves, guardians, and humans bound together by threads of silver light. My breath caught in my chest. The images moved with an almost living rhythm, telling stories I had never been allowed to see. You see that? Cale asked. All of it connects to you. Every guardian, every wolf, every choice. They were waiting for someone like you. Someone who could carry the balance forward. I reached out, instinctively touching the air above the pages. A shock ran through me, but not painful, pure, warm, and alive. The images responded, swirling faster, bending toward me as if welcoming my presence. I staggered back, eyes wide, heart pounding. And you knew all this? I whispered, turning to him. I have always known, he said, voice soft but unwavering. But knowing and revealing are two very different things. Some truths are dangerous until the moment is right. And now it is right. My mind reeled. The teasing, the invisibility, the loneliness, they all fell away in an instant, replaced by a strange mixture of exhilaration and responsibility. I was no longer just the quiet, overlooked girl. I was something more, something ancient, something chosen. And yet, beneath the thrill, a flicker of fear emerged. Power carried expectation. Connection carried consequence. The world I had known, the ordinary, quiet world, was gone. Cale stepped closer again, eyes steady on mine, and in that gaze I felt both reassurance and challenge. "There's more," he said quietly. "You must understand what it means to be part of this world, and who you truly are within it." I swallowed, heart hammering, and nodded. I want to know." A faint, almost imperceptible shift occurred in the air. I felt it before I saw it, a presence, something moving in the shadows just beyond the room. Watching, waiting. My pulse quickened. Cale's expression sharpened, and for the first time, I sensed tension. Subtle but undeniable, threading through the air. "Not everyone will welcome you," he said, his voice low. "Some will see this as a threat. Some will test you. And some will try to control what you carry inside." I took a deep breath, letting the reality settle around me. This world, hidden for centuries, had finally reached out and touched me. And now, standing in the candlelit library with Cale, I realized just how fragile, beautiful, and dangerous this awakening could be. And then it happened. A shadow flickered across the edge of the room, impossibly fast, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw a pair of glowing eyes staring straight at me. My heart froze. Cale tensed beside me, and the library felt impossibly small, charged with the presence of something or someone watching from the darkness. The moment passed as quickly as it came, yet the impact lingered. My pulse raced, my senses heightened, and one thought etched itself into my mind with stark clarity. The mystery was no longer just about me. It was about the world around me, and the dangers and wonders that waited in every shadow. The city felt different now. Shadows seemed longer, edges sharper, as though the air itself had become aware of me. Each step I took felt heavier, weighted with the knowledge of what I carried, the secret pulsing just beneath my skin. Ordinary life had slipped through my fingers, replaced by a world alive with tension, unseen currents, and forces I could not yet control. Cale stayed close, as he always did, but even his presence could not shield me from the unease settling in my chest. He moved with certainty, but I felt the tremor beneath his calm. Something was stirring, something beyond the library, beyond the forest, beyond us. "You feel it too, don't you?" I asked, voice trembling slightly despite my efforts to sound steady. He nodded, his eyes dark with concern. "The balance is shifting. Forces are noticing you, what you carry. Some will see it as power. Others will see it as a threat. And neither will hesitate." I swallowed hard, the words settling like stones in my stomach. Threat, power, danger. My ordinary world had already vanished, and now it seemed as if every step I took might ignite consequences I couldn't foresee. The first test came quietly, as most dangerous things do. A figure appeared on the street one evening, a stranger with an aura I could feel rather than see. I froze as our eyes met. There was recognition in that gaze, a silent understanding of what I had become, what I carried. The streetlights flickered as if responding to the presence, casting long, wavering shadows. Cale's hand found mine, grounding me, even as my pulse raced with alarm. "They're watching," he said quietly. "Always watching. We have to be careful." I nodded, trying to steady my breath. My instincts screamed to run, to retreat into the safe, ordinary world I had left behind. that world no longer existed. The pull that had brought me to him, to the library, to the awakening within me, was stronger than fear. I had crossed a line I could not uncross. The tension built daily. Subtle disturbances in the air, flickers of silver in shadows, strange coincidences that defied logic. They were all signs, warnings that the world was responding to my awakening. Even my own abilities began to shift in unpredictable ways. I could sense the movement of others before they appeared, feel the intention behind a glance, anticipate the rhythm of a heartbeat. It was thrilling and terrifying, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the wind could either lift me or throw me into the abyss. Cale guided me through the changes with patience, yet I could see the strain in his expression. His hand on mine was reassuring, but I could feel the tension in his grip, the careful way he measured every movement, every word. Love and logic tangled together in ways I could barely comprehend. My heart pulled toward him. My mind pulled toward caution. One night, as we walked through the forest near the city's edge, the tension erupted. A low growl vibrated through the trees, deep and resonant, sending a shiver through my spine. The shadows shifted, elongated, and I realized with sudden clarity that we were not alone. A pair of eyes, glowing faintly in the dark, fixed on us. "They've found us," Cale murmured, his body taut with readiness. "We don't have much time." My heart pounded and I felt the pull of panic rising. The instinct to flee warred with the understanding that running would not solve anything. The world was unstable, unpredictable, alive with forces I did not yet fully understand. And I was at the center of it. Cale's gaze met mine, steady and grounding. "Listen to me," he said. "You're stronger than you think. You felt the change. You felt the bond. That's what will protect us. But you must trust yourself and me." I nodded, drawing in a trembling breath. My hands found his and I felt the invisible thread between us tighten, pulsing like a heartbeat we shared. For the first time, the fear was balanced by a flicker of courage, small but significant, like a candle resisting the wind. The figure in the shadows advanced, moving with deliberate, silent steps. I could sense the power it carried, the intent it radiated. And yet, I did not falter. Cale's presence beside me reminded me that I was not alone, that I had allies in ways I had never imagined. A confrontation loomed, but it was not immediate. The figure paused at the edge of the clearing, observing, weighing, waiting. And in that moment I realized that the instability was not just external, it was internal. I was learning to navigate the pull of emotion against the call of reason, the tension between trust and danger. Every decision mattered. Every heartbeat mattered. The night stretched, tense and fragile, the forest alive with anticipation. A leaf fell, a branch snapped, and the sound seemed amplified, charged with significance. I could feel the eyes of the world, or at least the forces I was now a part of, upon me. The weight was exhilarating, suffocating, and liberating all at once. Cale turned to me, his expression solemn. "There will be more tests," he said quietly. "More challenges. But you will not face them alone. That you must remember." I nodded, though my mind was a whirlwind of questions and fears. I could feel the thread of the bond tightening, anchoring me even as the instability of the world pressed in from all sides. Love and trust, power and danger, fear and courage, they were all tangled together in ways I was only beginning to understand. And then the moment came that changed everything. A sudden, sharp movement in the shadows. A rush of air. The low, rumbling growl returned, closer now, insistent and demanding. Cale's eyes darkened, his body moving in a protective arc around me. I felt the invisible threads of power thrumming in response, my own pulse syncing with them in a rhythm I did not yet fully control. The figure emerged part shadow, part presence, its intentions unclear but undeniably dangerous. My stomach tightened, my heart raced, but amidst the fear, I felt a strange exhilaration. The world had shifted, yes, but so had I. I was no longer the quiet girl who had wandered unnoticed. I was part of something larger, alive with energy and connection, and every choice I made now carried weight. Cale stepped forward, eyes fixed on the shadow, but I could feel his attention split, tethered to me as well. It was a silent acknowledgement. The bond we shared was as much a weapon as it was a comfort. I reached out instinctively, and our hands met, a simple gesture, yet it pulsed with significance. Together, we would face what was coming. The figure hesitated, watching, testing, and I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. The world was no longer stable. Nothing could be taken for granted. Every moment, every heartbeat, every choice mattered more than it ever had before. And standing at the edge of that tension, I felt the first true clarity of my place in it all. I had to decide caution or courage, retreat or advance, fear or trust. The shadow shifted again, closer this time, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Cale's hand tightened around mine, and I drew in a deep, steadying breath. The unstable world had presented me with a challenge. And though I did not yet know the outcome, I understood one thing with absolute certainty. There was no turning back. The night had fallen quietly, but it carried a weight I could feel in my bones. After the events in the forest, the world seemed both familiar and impossibly strange, as if it had shifted on its axis and I was only just beginning to find my balance. I hadn't slept, though my eyes had closed in fits of restless exhaustion. The forest shadows, the glowing eyes, the tension that had thrummed in my chest, I carried it all with me. And somewhere in that tangled web of fear and excitement, Cale was there, steady and patient as always, guiding me without pushing, allowing me to find the pace of my own courage. We returned to the library, the sanctuary that had become both a refuge and a gateway into the unknown. Its quiet warmth wrapped around me like a familiar blanket, the scent of parchment and candle wax grounding me even as my mind raced. Cale moved silently beside me, his presence calm yet alert. I could sense the careful attention in the way he watched the room, as if expecting something unseen to appear. "I need to understand," I said finally, voice trembling but firm. "I need to know why this is happening to me, why I feel so connected to you, to this world." Cale's gaze softened, and he led me to a table in the center of the library. The light above fell in a golden pool, illuminating the old books and casting soft shadows across our faces. "You are ready to know," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "But what you're about to hear may change the way you see everything, including yourself." I nodded, swallowing hard. I wanted clarity, but clarity was a double-edged sword. The answers I sought might free me, or they might fracture the fragile sense of security I had begun to build. Cale reached for one of the books, a thick, leather-bound tome, and opened it carefully. The pages were filled with words, symbols, and illustrations I didn't fully understand, yet something about them resonated deeply within me. "Your lineage," he began, "is older and more intertwined with this world than anyone imagined. You are descended from the Guardians, but there is more, something unique that has lain dormant for generations." I leaned forward, eyes wide. "Unique? What do you mean?" He paused, searching for the right words. "Your blood carries a bond unlike any other. It allows you to connect with the creatures, the forces, and the energies around you, not as an observer, but as an integral part. That is why you felt the pull in the forest, why the shadows respond to you, and why your presence is impossible to ignore. A rush of disbelief and wonder tangled in my chest. All this time, I thought I was nothing, invisible. You were never invisible, Kale said firmly. You were hidden, protected, even from yourself. The Guardians knew that awakening too soon could be dangerous, not just for you, but for the balance of the world. I shivered, absorbing the weight of his words. And you knew all this? He nodded, his expression solemn. I have watched, guided from the edges, waiting for the moment when you could step fully into your own strength. And I have waited because I knew you had the resilience, the courage, and the heart to embrace it. The room felt impossibly quiet after that. I could hear my own heartbeat, rapid and insistent, echoing in my ears. The library, with its books and candles, seemed to pulse with an energy I hadn't noticed before. And I realized it was not just the space, it was the connection, the resonance of our bond. I wanted to speak, to ask how this could be, why I had never known, but the words faltered. Instead, I reached out instinctively, and Kale's hand met mine. The touch was electric, grounding, a reminder that I was not alone in the weight of this revelation. You're scared, he said gently, his thumb brushing the back of my hand. And you should be. Power, knowledge, connection, they are gifts. But they carry responsibility. And responsibility is never easy. I nodded, tears threatening to spill. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Kale's gaze softened further, warm and unwavering. Strength isn't about never feeling fear. It's about moving forward despite it. And you've already done that. You've stepped into a world most people could never even imagine. And you've faced it with courage. That is strength. I let the words sink in, allowing myself to feel their truth. The weight on my chest eased slightly, replaced by a tentative sense of purpose. But even as I felt that, another truth emerged, subtle yet impossible to ignore. The connection I felt with Kale, magnetic, unexplainable, undeniable, was more than just guidance. It was entwined with my very being, a bond I could not separate from the power stirring within me. Kale, I whispered, voice catching. This bond, it's not just about protection, is it? He paused, eyes searching mine with a depth that made my chest ache. No, he said finally. It's not. It's also about understanding. About recognizing each other in ways that go beyond words or reason. It's rare, and it's fragile, but it is also necessary. The room seemed to breathe around us, the air charged with something intangible yet profound. I realized then that the bond we shared was not just a tether. It was a promise, a responsibility, and a truth that demanded acknowledgement. It terrified me, and yet it exhilarated me, filling a void I hadn't known existed. I leaned back slightly, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions and revelations. So, all this time, everything I felt, it wasn't just imagination. Kale shook his head, a small, almost wistful smile touching his lips. No, it was real. Every pull, every connection, every sensation, it was preparing you for this moment. And it will continue to guide you, even when the path is uncertain. I felt a mixture of relief and fear, excitement and uncertainty. The revelations had unlocked a part of me that had always been dormant. But with that awakening came the weight of knowing the world would never be the same. And then, in the quiet glow of the candlelight, another truth emerged, subtle but undeniable. You've been waiting for me, I said slowly, words trembling. All this time, you were waiting for me to be ready. Kale's eyes softened and he nodded. I was, and I am. But waiting is not enough anymore. The world has shifted, and now action is required. You must step into your own strength, not just for yourself, but for the balance we are sworn to protect. I felt the enormity of it, the weight of legacy and responsibility pressed against my shoulders. And yet, intertwined with that weight, I felt the bond, the connection that had grown in quiet moments, in touches, in shared silences pulling me forward. It whispered that I was not alone, that together we could face what was coming. Just as I began to absorb the magnitude of everything, the room flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls. A sudden chill swept through the library, carrying with it a presence I had not felt before. Cale stiffened beside me, eyes narrowing. "They're here," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "Closer than we expected." My pulse quickened, but amidst the fear, I realized something crucial. I had the strength to face this. I had Cale by my side, and I had the bomb that had awakened within me. And more than that, I had begun to understand who I truly was, and that understanding was a power in itself. And then, just as the shadows seemed to converge, a faint glow emerged from the pages of the book in front of us. A symbol I had never seen, pulsating with warmth, as if acknowledging my presence, my awakening, and the journey that was only beginning. The city felt colder that evening, though the air was warm. Shadows stretched longer than usual, flickering with a life of their own as if the streets themselves were uneasy. I walked beside Cale, but the distance between us felt heavier, charged with unspoken words and doubts that neither of us dared voice. The glow of the streetlights cast elongated silhouettes, and for the first time, I realized how fragile our bond could be in a world that demanded certainty we had yet to earn. I tried to speak, to bridge the growing silence, but the words tangled in my throat. "Cale, are we ready for this?" I asked finally, my voice small. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he kept his gaze fixed ahead, alert to every flicker of movement, every shift in the shadows. His silence was heavier than any word, carrying a tension that wrapped around me like a vice. When he finally spoke, it was measured, careful. "There's no readiness for what's coming. There's only action. And sometimes, consequences." I nodded, trying to steady my racing heart, but inside, a storm was growing. I had felt the pull of destiny before, subtle but insistent, guiding me, preparing me. But now, it felt like a weight, pressing down, reminding me that choice and consequence were intertwined, and the wrong decision could cost everything, not just me, but everyone I cared about. The streets around us seemed alive with anticipation. I could sense eyes watching from the shadows, fleeting glimpses of presence that vanished before I could fully focus. My chest tightened, my pulse quickened, and I felt the familiar thrill of power and fear mixing in ways I had never known. I was strong. Yes, but strength was not the absence of vulnerability. And now, vulnerability felt unavoidable. Cale's hand brushed against mine, a small, grounding gesture, but even that connection felt strained. I wanted reassurance, certainty, but the tension in his grip, the way his eyes scanned every alley and corner, reminded me that trust was fragile here, and the world was testing us. "You've changed," he said softly, his voice almost lost in the hum of the city. "More than I expected. Stronger." But his gaze flicked to mine, carrying a weight that made my chest ache. "Strength isn't always enough." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then said, "The forces around you, around us. They will test not just your power, but your heart. They will force choices that have no easy answers. You must decide whether to follow destiny or forge your own path." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. The world had always seemed predictable, the routines familiar. And now, every certainty had been stripped away. Destiny loomed over me like a shadow, but choice was mine, and it terrified me. Could I navigate the pull of obligation against the desire to protect, the longing to love, the instinct to survive? A sudden movement in the alley ahead snapped my attention forward. A figure stepped out of the darkness, and I froze. The presence was familiar, yet foreign, carrying intent that made the hair on my arms stand on end. Cale moved instinctively in front of me, protective, vigilant, his entire being poised to react. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and steady, that the tension in his shoulders betrayed the urgency of the moment. The figure paused, eyes gleaming faintly in the dim light. Recognition flickered across my mind. This presence, this energy, carried a message I could not ignore. It wasn't immediately hostile, but it wasn't neutral either. It was a test, a challenge, a warning. And the realization made my stomach twist. The world had shifted. Every step forward would carry risk. Every decision would carry consequence. Cale's grip on my hand tightened. "Whatever you feel, whatever you think, remember, trust only what you know, what you feel with certainty. This world, it thrives on uncertainty." I nodded, heart pounding. His words anchored me, yet the uncertainty gnawed at my resolve. I had grown closer to him, bonded in ways I hadn't expected, and yet I could feel the fragility of our connection stretching under the pressure of forces beyond our control. Every glance, every gesture now carried weight, every silence threatening to unravel the trust we had built. We moved cautiously through the alleys, our shadows stretching long and thin beneath the streetlights. The figure followed at a distance, never speaking, never revealing intent, just observing. Each step felt like a negotiation with fate itself, and I realized, with a hollow ache, that the world was no longer mine to navigate alone. Cale's presence was essential, but even he could not shield me from the test that lay ahead. "You're thinking too much," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "You're letting fear cloud your instincts. Trust yourself, not just me." I nodded again, though the tension in my chest remained. Fear and hope tangled together, and I realized that my connection with him, though deep, was now being weighed against forces neither of us could fully control. And the thought of losing him, of losing this bond, made my heart ache in ways I could barely bear. The figure disappeared suddenly, as silently as it had appeared, leaving only the echo of their presence and a faint trace of unease. Cale exhaled sharply, his shoulders relaxing slightly, though the tension in his eyes remained. "They'll return," he said quietly. "And next time, they won't wait for shadows or distance. They'll come closer, testing you, testing us." I felt a flicker of panic, but amidst it, a deeper truth settled in my chest. I was no longer passive in this world. I had power, connection, and insight that others could not see. Yet with that power came responsibility. And the first real taste of heartbreak, I could not protect everything. Nor could I always choose safety over destiny. As we walked home, the city quiet, except for the occasional distant hum of life, I realized how fragile hope had become. The bond between Cale and me was deepening, yes, but the world's instability threatened it. And every decision I made could widen the distance between us or fracture it completely. When we reached my apartment, Cale paused at the doorway, gaze heavy with unspoken emotion. "Rest tonight," he said softly. "Tomorrow will demand more than courage. It will demand choices you may not want to make." I nodded, swallowing hard, the weight of his words settling over me like a shroud. The bond we shared pulsed between us, a thread of warmth in the darkness, yet it felt precarious. as if a single misstep could unravel everything. Alone in my room, I stared at the ceiling, the moonlight casting silver across the walls. The figure from the alley, the pull of destiny, the pressure of expectation, they all pressed against my mind. And in that quiet, I felt the first real sting of despair. The world was unstable. Love was being tested, and the choices before me were impossible. And then, a sudden thought struck me, a realization that chilled me more than the shadowed streets had. Cale's presence, steady and protective as it was, could not shield me from every challenge. There would come a moment, perhaps soon, when I would have to face the trials alone. A soft knock at the door startled me, but I didn't move. My mind raced. The bond, the pull, the destiny, it all demanded something of me. Something I was not yet certain I could give. And yet, even amidst fear, a spark of determination flared. I would not flee. I would not hide. But the ache of impending separation, of heartbreak looming just beyond reach, settled heavy in my chest. I closed my eyes, letting the night wrap around me, and whispered a silent promise to myself and to Cale that I would face whatever came next. That the uncertainty lingered, and with it, a quiet, shivering truth. Hope was fragile, trust could break. And love, even the deepest bond, could not shield us from the rising tension of a world teetering on the edge. The storm had gathered without warning. Not rain or wind, but a tension that crackled through the air, making every shadow seem alive, every whisper of movement a threat. I could feel it in my chest, a tightness that mingled fear with anticipation. The city around us felt suspended, waiting for the inevitable collision. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but there was no turning back now. Cale and I moved together, instinct and trust guiding our steps. The forest near the city's edge stretched before us, darker than ever, the trees casting elongated, dancing shadows in the faint light. Each sound, the crack of a branch, the flutter of unseen wings, the rustle of leaves felt magnified. It was a stage set for what I had feared would come. The confrontation I had felt stirring ever since the first shadows had watched me. "You feel it too, don't you?" I whispered, almost afraid to speak. Cale's eyes narrowed, scanning the forest with an intensity I had come to trust. "Yes," he said quietly. "And it's stronger than I expected. Whatever comes, it won't hold back." I swallowed hard, the weight of the truth pressing down. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. The pull between fear and courage had never been sharper. I had trained my mind, strengthened my bond, but nothing had prepared me for the reality of standing on the edge of danger, knowing that everything depended on how I faced it. We reached the clearing, the place the shadows had led us to before, and froze. The figure that had haunted my thoughts emerged from the darkness, more formidable, more alive than I had imagined. Its presence radiated power, awareness, and a challenge that made my knees tremble. It didn't speak, but the energy that surrounded it conveyed a clear message. Test, choose, survive. Cale stepped in front of me instinctively, his hand brushing against mine in silent reassurance. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "remember your strength. Remember your bond. And remember your choice matters." The figure moved, and the forest seemed to respond, shadows twisting as if alive, the wind shifting with intent. I felt my senses sharpen, the bond with Cale tightening, pulsing in rhythm with my own heartbeat. The reality was undeniable. This confrontation was not just about survival, it was about proving who I had become, what I had become, and whether I could stand against the forces that sought to challenge me. A sudden surge of energy rippled through the clearing. I felt it like a wave crashing against my chest, threatening to knock the air from my lungs. The figure advanced, silent but unyielding, and I realized in that moment that retreat was no longer an option. The choice had been thrust upon me: act or be consumed. Cale's hand tightened around mine, anchoring me. "Focus," he said. "Feel the bond. Let it guide you." I closed my eyes briefly, summoning every lesson, every instinct, every spark of courage I had discovered in the past weeks. The connection between us, once gentle and subtle, now burned with intensity, a lifeline of trust and power. I stepped forward, and the figure responded immediately, energy colliding, silent yet deafening in its impact. We circled, measured, attuned to each other's movements. Every choice, every reaction mattered. I realized that the figure was testing not just my power, but my heart, my ability to stay grounded in who I was, to make decisions that were not dictated solely by fear or instinct. Cale's presence was my anchor, yet I had to act independently, to trust myself and the strength that had awakened within me. Suddenly, the figure's energy surged again, stronger, pushing against us in waves. I stumbled, fear lancing through me, and Cale caught my arm, steadying me. His eyes searched mine, silent but full of understanding. "You are ready, but the risk is real." The tension tightened in my chest, a reminder that choice and consequence were inseparable. I took a deep breath, centering myself. My mind cleared, the fear settling into a sharpened focus. I could feel the bond, the pulse of power, the rhythm of connection. And I realized something crucial. This confrontation was not about defeating the figure. It was about embracing who I had become, trusting in my abilities and standing fully in the reality of my destiny. I stepped closer, and the figure paused, almost as if recognizing my resolve. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Cale's hand on mine pulsed with reassurance, and I felt the energy between us surge. A perfect harmony of trust, courage, and connection. Then, in a sudden, breathtaking moment, the figure moved with lightning speed. I barely had time to react. Shadows collided, energy flared, and for a heartbeat, the world felt suspended between chaos and calm. Cale's voice echoed in my mind. "Trust yourself. Trust the bond." I did. The power I had felt awakening over weeks, first subtle, then undeniable, now responded to my focus. Energy pulsed outward from me, radiating in waves that seemed to harmonize with the forest, the shadows, even the figure before me. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't force. It was acknowledgement, a claim of presence, of identity, of strength. The figure froze, the energy in the clearing shifting like a tide. I realized then that the confrontation was not only external, it was internal. Every doubt, every fear, every hesitation had brought me to this moment. And every choice I had made to embrace courage and trust had prepared me to stand fully, unflinching, in my own power. Cale's grip on my hand tightened in silent affirmation. "You are ready," he said, and in those words, I felt the weight of every lesson, every connection, every truth that had led me here. But even as I stood tall, aware of my own strength, the shadows in the forest seemed to whisper of new challenges. The figure, once a singular presence, began to shift, revealing hints of forces beyond what I had imagined. Others, waiting, observing, testing. The realization struck me like a cold wind. This confrontation was only the beginning. I glanced at Cale, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. The bond between us pulsed in perfect rhythm, yet I could sense his own awareness of the danger still ahead. And then, without warning, the figure recoiled, vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only a lingering energy that thrummed with intent. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the forest breathing around us, the world settling briefly, holding its rhythm in the calm after the storm. But I knew, deep in my heart, that this was not over. The figure's retreat was temporary. The forces at play were larger than we had yet seen. And the choices we would have to make next would demand courage I wasn't sure I possessed. Cale looked at me, eyes steady, voice low, but urgent. "You did well," he said. "But the danger isn't gone. They will return, and next time, it won't be just a test. It will demand everything from us." I nodded, chest tight with exhaustion, fear, and a strange exhilaration. I had faced the confrontation. I had stood fully in my power. And yet, the shadow of what was coming stretched far beyond the clearing, beyond the forest, beyond anything I had yet imagined. A sudden gust of wind rattled the trees, and I felt it, a presence closing in from the edge of perception, unseen yet undeniable. Cale stiffened beside me, eyes scanning the darkness, and I realized with a sinking certainty. The grand confrontation was over for now, but the war had just begun. And then, as if echoing the truth of the moment, the figure reappeared, far larger, more formidable, eyes glowing faintly, the air around it charged with energy that promised more than a challenge. My chest tightened, my hands trembled slightly, and the bond with Cale pulsed urgently. This was it. The moment that would define everything. The forest pulsed with energy, shadows writhing like living creatures under the moonlight. Every breath I took felt charged, electric, as if the air itself had been waiting for this moment. The figure from before hovered at the edge of the clearing, its presence immense, the weight of unseen forces pressing down around us. Cale stood beside me, hand brushing mine, steady as always, yet I could sense the tension beneath his calm. He was a rock, but even the strongest stone can feel the tremors of an earthquake beneath it. "I never imagined it would come to this," I whispered, voice barely audible over the hum of power in the air. "Everything feels heavier." Cale's gaze softened, reassuring yet firm. "Heavy, yes, but that weight is not a punishment. It is a test. And tests are meant to reveal what you are capable of." I took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the bond between us. It was no longer a gentle pull. It was a living, breathing force that flowed through me, connecting us, fortifying me. The fear remained, but courage was present now too, tempered by the knowledge that I was not alone. The figure moved forward, and the energy in the clearing shifted. I felt a pull deep within me, a recognition of power I had only begun to understand. The confrontation before had been a test of control, of instinct. This was a challenge of the heart. Everything I had learned, every bond I had forged, every choice I had made, converged into this moment. Cale's hand on mine pulsed with silent reassurance. "Whatever happens," he said, "you must follow your truth. Trust the bond. Trust yourself." I nodded, trying to steady the tremor in my chest. My mind raced, and for a moment I wondered if I could bear the weight of what lay ahead. And then I saw at the figure's gaze, almost piercing, not just observing, but challenging me to stand fully in my own power. "You are ready," Cale murmured. And I realized that he was not only speaking to me, but reminding himself too. We were partners in this. Yet the final choice, the defining action, rested with me. The figure surged forward, energy colliding with the ground in ripples that made the earth beneath us hum. I felt it in my chest, a wave of tension and exhilaration that almost knocked me off balance. And then, instinctively, I reached for the bond we shared, focusing every thought, every heartbeat, on the connection that had grown between us. A sudden flash of light pulsed from the center of the clearing, emanating from the bond itself. Cale's eyes widened, not with fear, but with awe. "It's responding," he said, voice low. "Your strength, your courage, it's all coming together." I felt the energy surge through me, warmth and power intertwining in a way that was almost intoxicating. The figure hesitated, as if recognizing the shift, acknowledging the force I had become. And yet, the tension in the air did not dissipate. The challenge was far from over. It had simply transformed. The next moments were a blur of movement and energy. Shadows twisted, light flared, and every heartbeat felt magnified. I could sense Cale beside me, guiding me, anchoring me, yet allowing me to act independently. The bond pulsed, a constant reminder that we were intertwined in purpose as well as heart. And then the truth became clear. This confrontation was never meant to be a battle of strength alone. It was a test of clarity, of choice, of sacrifice. To stand fully in my power, I had to let go of something, an attachment, a fear, a hesitation that had been holding me back. I looked at Cale, the weight of what I understood pressing down on me. I think I know what I have to do, I whispered, voice trembling. His gaze held mine, unwavering, filled with trust and understanding. Do what you must, he said softly. Whatever it is, I am with you. A tear slid down my cheek, not of fear, but of resolve. The bond between us pulsed, almost guiding my next action. I took a step forward, raising my hands as if to embrace the energy that surrounded the figure, the forest, the clearing itself. And then, I let go not of Cale, not of love, but of the hesitation that had kept me tethered to doubt. The energy surged, responding to the clarity of my intention. Light cascaded outward, shadows recoiling, and the figure paused, almost reverently. In that instant, I realized that true power was not domination. Not force, it was understanding, acceptance, and the courage to choose. Cale's hand tightened over mine, and I felt his pulse sinking with mine, the bond a perfect rhythm of strength and love. Together we were a force, but the defining action was mine. I took a deep breath and stepped fully into my choice, letting the energy flow around me, through me, and into the clearing. The figure trembled, then began to dissolve into a mist of shadows and light, leaving behind a quiet that was almost sacred. The forest seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had gripped it for so long. And I knew, with an undeniable certainty, that the confrontation had ended not with destruction, but with transformation. Cale looked at me, eyes wide with awe and relief. You did it, he said, voice trembling slightly. You embraced everything. The bond, the courage. You've changed the course of it all. I exhaled, chest tight with emotion, tears of relief and joy mingling with the rush of energy still coursing through me. I think I understand now, I whispered. The strength, the bond, the purpose. It's not just about power. It's about connection, love, trust. Cale pulled me close, not needing words, just presence. And in that embrace, I felt the full weight of what had been achieved. We had faced the ultimate confrontation, not a battle of fists or claws, but a challenge of heart and spirit. But even as relief settled over us, a new awareness flickered at the edges of my consciousness. The transformation was profound, yet it was also a beginning. Every choice we made, every bond we strengthened, had consequences that would ripple forward. And somewhere, beyond the clearing, beyond the forest, the world waited uncharted, alive, unpredictable. I drew back slightly, gazing at Cale. This is only the beginning, isn't it? I asked softly. He nodded, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. Yes, but you've proven yourself. We've both proven ourselves. And now, we face the future together, whatever it may hold. A final gust of wind stirred the trees, carrying with it a promise of change, of new challenges, and of hope that had been tempered in fire and shadow. I felt the bond pulse once more, steady, alive, and unwavering. It was a reminder that we were ready, not just for what had come, but for everything that lay ahead. And in that moment, standing beneath the moonlight, I realized that the ultimate confrontation had not just changed the world around me, it had changed me. I was no longer the girl who had felt invisible, powerless, or uncertain. I was stronger, wiser, and more certain of the path I had chosen. And I understood with every heartbeat that the bond, the love, and the courage we shared would guide us through whatever came next. The dawn broke slowly, soft gold spilling over the horizon, turning the forest edges into pools of gentle light. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the world felt still. The tension that had gripped every shadow, every corner, every heartbeat seemed to dissolve with the morning mist. I stood at the edge of the clearing, Kale beside me, hands brushing, our bond steady and warm like a quiet promise. The events of the past night's confrontations, revelations, fears, and choices felt almost dreamlike now, softened by the new light. Yet, I knew they had changed me forever. I was no longer the girl who had wandered through life unnoticed, bullied and dismissed, uncertain of her place in the world. I had discovered strength, courage, and a connection deeper than I had ever imagined. The forest had been the crucible, the bond the guide, and love the anchor. Kale looked at me, eyes reflecting the first sunbeams. His expression carried relief, pride, and a quiet awe. "We made it," he said softly, voice almost reverent. "Together." I nodded, feeling the truth of it resonate through me. Together we had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear. Together we had embraced our power and our choices. And together we had emerged not just intact but transformed. The forest around us seemed to sigh, the leaves stirring gently as if acknowledging the shift in energy. The shadows that had once seemed threatening now appeared softer, almost protective, moving with the rhythm of a world that had settled into balance. I could feel it in the air, in the warmth of the light, in the subtle hum that pulsed through the trees. There was peace here, quiet but alive, a promise of continuity. I turned to Kale, searching for words that could convey the gratitude, relief, and love that churned within me. I understand now," I said, voice catching. Everything, the bond, the challenges, the fear, it wasn't just about me. It was about trust, about connection, about choosing who I want to be, even when the world pushes back. He reached out, gently brushing my cheek with his thumb. A gesture of comfort and recognition. "Yes," he said, voice soft. "And you chose well. You embraced everything, faced every challenge, and in doing so, you became more than even you imagined. You became someone the world and I can rely on." A quiet smile formed on my lips, though tears threatened. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted, feeling the weight of every moment we had shared. Every shadow, every surge of energy, every whispered warning, it had led us here. And through it all, he had been my anchor, my guide, my partner. Kale's gaze softened, and he reached for my hand, lacing his fingers with mine. "And you were my light," he said. "Every step we took together, I felt it. Your courage, your heart. It made me stronger too. You reminded me why we fight, why we endure, why we trust." I felt warmth spread through me at his words, a comfort that settled deep in my chest. The bond between us pulsed quietly, no longer a surge of urgency but a steady rhythm. A shared heartbeat that reminded me that we had found balance, not just in power, but in heart. We walked slowly through the clearing, sunlight spilling across the forest floor. The energy of the night now transformed into something serene, almost sacred. Every tree, every shadow, every rustle of leaves felt alive, witnessing the quiet culmination of struggle and courage. And yet, Even in this serenity, I could sense the infinite possibilities stretching ahead. The world was vast. Challenges would arise, and destiny would continue to unfold, but for the first time, I felt ready to meet it all. I stopped at a small brook that wound through the forest, its waters sparkling in the morning light. The sound was soothing, a gentle song after nights of turmoil. I knelt, letting my fingers trail in the cool flow, and felt a sense of closure wash over me. This was not just a moment of triumph, it was a moment of understanding, of harmony with myself, with Kale, and with the world around me. Kale knelt beside me, and together we watched the water ripple, carrying reflections of sunlight and shadow in a delicate dance. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "Just like this moment. Just like us." I smiled, leaning slightly against him. "Yes," I said softly. "It feels like the world is finally right. Like we finally found where we belong." He tilted his head, resting lightly against mine. "And we will keep finding it," he said. "Every day, every challenge, every choice. Together." A soft breeze stirred, carrying the scent of earth, leaves, and the faint remnants of night. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing it in, letting it fill me with calm, with certainty. The trials we had faced were behind us, yet they had shaped us into who we were meant to be. And in that shaping, I found a profound sense of peace. When I opened my eyes again, the sunlight had grown stronger, painting the forest in golden hues. The shadows, once threatening, now danced gently at the edges, and I realized that fear had been transformed into understanding. I had faced uncertainty, embraced connection, and emerged with clarity. And Kale's presence reminded me that love, trust, courage, and loyalty could endure even the darkest trials. We rose together, hands still intertwined, and stepped out of the forest clearing. The city beyond awaited, alive and bustling, yet somehow calmer, brighter, more familiar. I felt ready for it, ready for life, ready for whatever destiny might bring. And in that readiness, I understood the ultimate truth. We were stronger together, and the bond we shared was unbreakable. A quiet force that would guide us always. As we reached the edge of the forest, I turned one last time to look back. The sunlight touched every branch, every leaf, every shadow, transforming the landscape into a memory of struggle, courage, and transformation. I knew this would remain with me forever, a reminder of what we had endured, and what we had become. Kale's hand found mine again, firm, warm, grounding. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice soft but certain. I smiled, a calm certainty filling me. "Yes," I said, "for everything." Together we stepped forward, leaving the clearing behind, carrying our bond, our courage, and our love into the light of a new day. And as the sun rose fully, painting the sky with shades of gold and rose, I felt a single, unshakable truth settle in my heart. The world was vast, our journey endless, but with trust, love, and purpose. Every path could be faced, every challenge met with courage. The final image lingered, simple and eternal. The two of us, silhouetted against the rising sun, hands entwined, hearts united, standing on the edge of a world forever changed, ready for the endless possibilities of a life we had claimed together.